So I've come to the stark conclusion that all religion and all ways of liberating yourself is liberating yourself from false ideas, from things that aren't true, things that do not exist and that are thought matrices, ways of thinking. And a way of thinking that particularly causes a lot of anxiety and gets in the way of, doesn't get in the way of anything, but we get in the way of ourselves thinking that it's real, is the idea of the self and the idea of reality being something else that I have to face, that I have to get, something, that I have to face. I have to face myself, number one, and number two, I got to face reality, face the facts, as we say in common speech. And Zen. So I'm gonna read from this book, The Way of Zen by Alan Watts. And Alan Watts is an incredible figure who is basically my mentor from beyond the grave. I'm his disciple from beyond the grave, basically. And Zen is essentially a mix between Taoism and Buddhism. It's a baby between Taoism and Buddhism. And Taoism is all about going with the Tao, going with the way, basically flowing downstream instead of flowing upstream. Going with yourself, with what you are. Taoism, it's Wu Wei, non-forcing, non-resisting. So you don't resist yourself, because any resistance towards self is resistance towards self. So obviously you're going to resist yourself, resist your own action, and you getting in your own way will create hesitation, and therefore hesitation creates blockages in the way of the flow of what you are. So the Tao is the flow of everything. Taoism, so going with the Tao, going with the way, and they found out what the way is, and they go with it instead of going against it. Whereas Buddhism is not a doctrine in its modern sense. There's a lot of Chinese that believe that Buddhism is actually a doctrine where you believe in actual deities, where you believe that you go places after you die. They believe in the wheel of samsara. They believe in the Buddha as in the same sense that we believe in Christ. That Buddha is the savior. That when they die, they go, just like when a Christian dies, they go to see Christ. When a Buddhist dies, they go to see Buddha. But they're not actually a real Buddhist. Buddhism is really not a doctrine, but it's a method. It's a method of liberation. It's a method of talking yourself out of it, basically. Talking yourself out of the illusions. So a Buddhist teacher would say to his disciple, "What's your problem? What's the deal? What actually is your issue?" Well, my mind is disturbed. Well, your mind is disturbed because you desire. Try not to desire. Okay? So the student goes away and tries not to desire. In doing that, the student desires not to desire, right? Because not desiring is the answer. The answer to the problem is to stop desiring for things, and then you're with yourself, right? So that's the whole point, is to get with yourself. So the student comes back and he says, "I am desiring not to desire. What do I do about that?" Well, desire, or don't desire to not desire. He goes back. The student then desires not to desire to not desire. The student desires not to desire to not desire. And then he comes back and he says, "Well, I'm still desiring." And then the teacher says, "Well, try as much as you can to desire as little as you can, to not desire to not desire to not desire." The student goes back and then realizes that all he can do is desire, and then he comes back together with himself. So it's a way of, I believe the sutras are it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue between the teacher and the student, whereas our religions are doctrines telling you what to believe in. But Buddhism, as long as you believe in something, you're not in actual reality, which is the plain fact. Because if I believe that this universe is something, say we use the myth, Christianity as we practice it now is we take the myth of Christianity, because you need mythology in order to describe the world, in order to describe what's indescribable in terms of words, right? So Christianity, we take the myth as literal. Imagine, so an example of a myth would be to say that the universe itself is a black balloon. To describe the expanding universe theory, we picture and we image, we idolize the universe as a black balloon. We say, think of the universe as a black balloon in order to understand this theory. The universe is the big black balloon with its stars on the balloon, and it's expanding like this. So that's a myth. That's the myth of the if I believe that myth is actually true, that the universe itself is an actual balloon, then I'm living in an idea, no matter how ridiculous the idea is, according to what we subscribe to as non-ridiculous. Because another society could take what we believe in and what we think is not ridiculous as ridiculous. And then we think that they're ridiculous. Just like the communists would think that democracy is ridiculous, whereas democracy would think that communism is ridiculous. But the funny thing about those two things is that they're both the same ideology flipped on its head. Two sides of the same coin. Because it's based on individualism, the collective democracy. We're all responsible. How terrifying is that? That we're all responsible. That's why we're so insecure. We're all responsible for not only our lives, but we're also responsible for the life of the country. We choose the leaders. Every single one of us is responsible. What do I know about running a country? What do I know about who I should vote for and who I shouldn't vote for? What do I know? I like the candidate and I don't like this one. I got two choices. Is that really free anyways? But I digress. Both are based on individualism, so both are really the same thing. So it doesn't matter how ridiculous the idea is. According to Buddhism, as long as I believe that an idea of the universe is the actual universe, then I'm fooling myself. Then I'm not in actual reality, because a thought of reality doesn't match up to exactly what reality is. Reality itself cannot be spoken of. That's the whole thing. Reality, Zen, when we get to Zen cannot be spoken of. Because Zen is... And it's funny, how often can we really do that? How often can we really sit here and not be thinking about the next thing we gotta do for more than a few seconds? We sit down to meditate, and it's funny, we sit down with the intention of meditating, the intention of spiritually progressing. We meditate as an exercise, just as if we go to the gym in order to get bigger muscles. We meditate in order to get bigger brain muscles or focus presence. But as long as you're looking for presence, then obviously you're not present. So if you meditate with an intention in mind, then you're not actually meditating. And so that's the tricky thing, is that we think that I should meditate because I am not present. So I gotta meditate in order to be present. Okay, I'll sit down. Let me try to be present. Oh, someday I'll get present. It's gonna happen. See? So enlightenment is, you can put it off indefinitely, and as long as you put it off, you think it's gonna happen, and it's not gonna happen. Because enlightenment is now. And the secret is that you've been enlightened the entire time. You've been the self the entire time. You already have it. So it's funny, we misuse the terms yogi and yoga. in modern day culture. We think yoga is a method and an exercise with our physical exercises doing yoga. We think that yoga is an actual exercise in order to get to a certain point. And then a yogi is someone, a traveler, a nomad, someone practicing yoga who is on the way to liberation. But what the original terms mean is that yoga is not an exercise. It's not you're looking for something. It's not I'm on the path, I'm exercising so that I can become enlightened. But yoga originally means in Hinduism the state of union with the self. So the in where the Jivatman, which is the ego, finds out his identity with the Jivatman, the illusion, because the ego doesn't exist, and it's really the Atman. So then the Jivatman is dissolved, and then the Atman is there. And then the Atman realizes that the Atman is the same as Brahman, which Brahman can be translated in Western terms to God. So the Atman realizes his identity, and this is enlightenment, with the Brahman, with the whole self, with the only self that there is, the entirety of being, and that's the Brahman. And a yogi is someone who has realized this, someone like a Buddha, someone like a Christ, with the proper title. So Buddha isn't a name. Buddha is not a name, but it's a title. It's a title for someone who has realized, come to the realization. But it's funny because Gautama the Buddha realized that he is the entire self. He came to his enlightenment experience under the famous tree. I don't know what the name is of that tree. He came to the enlightenment experience when he was under the tree, when he stopped trying to become enlightened. When he stopped trying to get there, he gave up. He completely gave up. And then in giving up, you stop doing karma, which is going farther from yourself. And you're released from karma, and then all your actions from there, from whence you become enlightened, is dharma. And dharma is your actions, your actual free will, when you know who you are, which is God, which is the entire universe. And this is what Jesus Christ realized. Jesus Christ is like a Buddha. He actually went to Tibet and he practiced with the Buddhists there, and he came back and he learned all how to walk on water. Monks walk on water. Monks who are enlightened actually walk on water, and they perform miracles, and they do all sorts of things because they realize that the identity of the self doesn't exist. Because an identity, what is it? Just the thought of yourself that has been mentally constructed. They realize the identity with the external world, so that the external world is yourself. So Jesus was a man who went all the way, and he became enlightened, and realized his identity with God, with the entire self, which is what a Buddha is. Someone who realized their identity with the self. The Atman realizes their identity with the Brahman. The Jivatman is no longer a thing. They realize it's an illusion. And then the Atman, in its pure state, realizes its identity with the Brahman. But some people, a lot of people, like me, put it off. Put it off indefinitely. Why? Because we're frightened by the experience. The experience is ultimate. It's so grand. It's everything. It's everything and nothing. So you have to let go of everything. And you can't do it unless you let go of all ideas. Unless you let go of all ideas of what's real. Why do you want an idea of what's real? You want an idea of what's real so you can have something to hold on to. But as long as you're holding on to something, you can't be everything. Because if you think you're holding on to something else, then you're not everything. If you're holding on to something else. So you're realizing your identity with everything. And also, the Buddhists say, if you're everything, then obviously you're nothing, because there's no thing outside of you. So you're infinite. There's no thing. Just, that's why it's nothing. Void. And in the Secret Oral Teachings by Alexandria David Neal, she says that those who play the childish game of identifying themselves with the forms on the consciousness, the forms on the screen of consciousness, because the consciousness is the underlying everything to everything. So if you identify yourself with the form upon which the experience happens, then you're playing a game. And it's not real, it's illusion. So that's what everybody's doing. Everybody is literally identifying themselves with the forms on the screen. And they're clinging to the forms on the screen, but they don't realize that they are the entire screen. And that's just what they are. Nothing. No thing. Absolutely nothing. So it's like, as long as you're doing a practice to become enlightened, then you're literally like tacitly agreeing with yourself, I'm going to put this off. It's too much for me. You might as well admit it to yourself. Like, see, I have to admit it to myself. I'm putting this off. Sadly enough, I'm putting this realization that I'm the entire self off. So that I don't realize it. So that I don't know. I'm putting it off for sometime later. But as long as it's sometime later, it's not now. And now is the only time there is. So it's going to be never. That's the predicament. I had a vision one time where I just realized that all we are is consciousness, and that consciousness is experiencing itself through the illusion of this body. It's in the illusion of this body, but all that's real is the consciousness. And you know what? You couldn't know anything that's real unless you had the underlying ground from which the real comes up. So you couldn't have real unless there's not real. So everything really is not real. You couldn't have something unless there was nothing in order to incarnate into it. You couldn't have an object unless there was space for that object to be in. So you couldn't have real unless you had not real. So they go down to the basics, just the basic thing, and realize that everything is not real. And our scientists and physicists do know that we live in a simulation. And it may sound funny to you because it's an unfamiliar idea, and we're quite afraid of unfamiliar ideas. But they have found that the deeper you go into matter, the more there's nothing. That you can keep going and going and going as far as you want to go, like a limit approaching the y-axis in mathematics. You can just keep going and going up. You're never going to get to the limit. You're never going to get to the fundamental stuff, because of course you won't. How could there be a fundamental thing to everything? In an atom, or let's start with a molecule. Say the molecule, the molecule itself is the size of this fist. The other molecule, or the next closest molecule, would be all the way over there. Maybe 50 feet away, 70 feet away. And then you go into the molecule, you take its nucleus. You picture the nucleus as the size of a dime. The nucleus itself is the size of a dime, and then surrounding it is empty space until you reach its electrons, which are proportionate to the space surrounding the nucleus in the middle of a cathedral. And then the electron would be on the edge of the cathedral. And then you take an atom. Say you take the atom the size of your fist. The next atom would be all the way in the next city, miles away. Between it, it's nothing. So that's what matter is. They figured this out. That we're literally, and somehow, not just that fact, because that fact proves that dense reality, the dense matter, is really nothing. You keep going down and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The space between whatever, the quark and then the next quark. It keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the space between it, right? So that proves that reality itself, whatever it is diaphanous. That it's really not solid as we thought it was, but it's really full of empty space. And it's really nothing. But they've also found out by very intelligent calculations that no person who would say that we're not in a simulation could figure out that we are in a simulation, that this is a simulated reality. And you tell that to a normal person, and they'll say, "Why do you think that?" But why don't you think that? You throw the question back at them. Why don't you think that? Well, because we've been around for tens of thousands of years, and I apparently exist, and there's other people, and humanity has been running for a long time. That's the answer you'll get. But it's like, that doesn't disprove that we're in a simulation. The time for us, it seems like years and years and years, but the time for someone running a simulation could be half a second to simply render the actual simulation itself and run it. So our physicists, our scientists, the smartest people in the world have figured out that we are actually in a simulation. So what do you want to listen to? Them, the smartest people, or yourself? But Buddhism has figured this out way before we had the science to. Or maybe back then we did have the science, it's just been covered up. But I want to get to the point, or to the page, where it was a really funny page because it related our attempts. The reason why we're not enlightened is because we're trying to grab our own hand with this hand. Say this hand is trying to grab itself. This is what we're doing when we face trauma. Like when we're a kid, we're not indoctrinated into any ideas. We haven't had trauma yet. So we're not afraid. And when you're afraid, what do you do? Or when you feel uncomfortable, your physical manifestation of this, you cross your legs. Yep. You pretend like you're all right, but you're really crossing your legs because you feel uncomfortable. Crossing your legs. What are you doing? Grabbing your arm. Yeah. Doing this. What are you doing? Even behind your back. You're holding on to yourself. You're trying to grab yourself. So my vision was that our consciousnesses are actually trying to grab onto themselves. That's the whole thing. That's why we're so confused, and that's why we're not enlightened, is because our own consciousness is trying to grab itself. The knife is trying to cut itself. Yeah. How could a knife cut itself? How could your consciousness grab onto itself? Could it ever? It could never. But that's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to grab onto ourselves. So that was my vision. And then realizing that you don't have to grab onto yourself because you never could is enlightenment. And that's simply the cessation of stopping grabbing onto yourself. Of stopping trying to grab onto yourself. You never could get there. It's like a dog chasing its own tail. You're spinning in circles. So spinning in circles. Some people are doing it slower than others. Slower chasing themselves. Trying to get there because we're all thinking someday I'll get it. Underlying beneath even in our conscious mind. But we don't admit this to ourselves. We're slowly we're saying someday I'll get it. What we're really doing is saying someday I'll get my tail. Someday. And then the insane people are the ones who are trying to do it faster. And that's obviously the physical manifestation of being insane, is when you're literally trying to get your own head. And then the ones who we call normal, but who are not enlightened, are the ones who are covering it up. uh, with a false pretense, with a false ego, but are also doing it slower. Maybe doing it faster at other times, but trying to do it slower. Because nobody understands that you can never get your own self. You can never get yourself. You can never see your own face. Your eyes can never see themselves. Your hand could never grab itself. Is this grabbing my... Oh. Your hand wants to grab itself just like it grabs this cup. But it could never. So that's the enlightenment. The enlightenment is just literally stopping trying to do that. I'm not saying I've stopped doing that. I'm not saying I've stopped trying to get my own head. But all of us are. And we don't even know it. Or at least we don't know it conventionally. But on the deeper level, that's what we're trying to do. And getting hobbies, that's why it's so important to get a hobby. It's so important to do something. To do something with your life. To distract yourself, to watch TV, to rest, to write, to read, to learn something new. That hobbies are the most important thing because it stops you from trying to get yourself. And it puts you right where you are. And right where you are, you stop trying to get the illusory self when you love something. And that's when you're focused. The Christians, the Christian religion, even if believing that the myths are true, that the literal imagery is true, it still serves a purpose. Because it keeps people focused, keeps people treading. You know, whereas if you don't have a purpose, if you don't know what you're doing, then you're gonna end up spinning yourself in circles. Unless you know that you can never get yourself, and you realize that that's what you're doing, is trying to get your own consciousness. Because your own consciousness is where the bliss is at. When you were a child, when you were a baby, the bliss was when you were with yourself. But then you got the mistaken idea due to our language that there's a thinker to the thoughts. There's a watcher to what's going on. So you split yourself in two, and you think that you can actually get yourself now. But you can never get yourself. So we've somehow been fooled into the idea that we know that when we were one with ourselves, when we weren't trying to get ourselves, it was beautiful. It was absolutely immaculate. But then we had these ideas about the world, which perpetuated the idea that there's something to get. And then we know the one thing that we want is actually ourselves. Ourselves are the most important thing. That's why we think it's so unhealthy to love your ego, because your ego doesn't exist. It's an illusion. That's why people are unhealthy. It's not because they're arrogant or mean to people, but it's because they're literally operating under a delusion. But yourself, your real self, that's the thing to get. That's the thing that you love. So you think that you can we have the idea that we can get things, and that getting things is important. That's how we're controlled. By thinking that we have to get somewhere, get something. And and subconsciously we know ourself, that's a sacred space. So we feel like we've lost ourselves because when we experience trauma, we try to spin away from the trauma. So our consciousness tries to avoid it. And then in avoiding it, you build that habit, right? And then you think, oh, well, since you've lost your centrality, you've lost your bliss, you've lost your enlightenment, your presence, where you're not chasing yourself, because you've experienced something traumatic, and then you've suddenly lost yourself. You think, because we have the idea that we need to get things, and that in order to be a useful human being, we need to accomplish things and get things. We think on the basis of our conscious mind that we need to get ourselves again. We need to get ourselves again. That's why when someone has a midlife crisis, they buy sports cars and they wear their old clothes from high school and they do exciting things and to make them feel alive again, because they're trying to get themselves and they think that's how they're going to get themselves. But the whole reason why you don't have yourself is because you're trying to get yourself. So you're spinning away from yourself. Stop doing stuff, stop karma-ing, and that's meditation. When you stop doing things, it's a cessation of doing things. But when we have the idea that meditating in order to be present, you're still doing things. And then, okay, I'll stop doing things. That's still doing something. Not doing something is still doing something. I won't do anything. Fine. I won't desire. But then that's still desiring not to desire. In trying not to do something, you're still trying to get it. And so people go away from teachers when they realize, oh, it's futile. It's futile. I mean, I can listen to philosophy and have discussions all day, but it's not going to fix anything. So I'll go away. And that in going away, you're still trying to get it. So then they come back. And it's like, all you got to do is you realize that your consciousness, this body is an illusion. It's a simulation. And that the real consciousness, what you are, is when you stop avoiding yourself, stop trying to chase your own tail, grasp your own hand, then that's when enlightenment happens. It's like, okay, this is the page. The second noble truth relates to the cause of frustration, which is said to be Trishna, clinging or grasping, based on avidya, which is ignorance and unconsciousness. Now, avidya is the formal opposite of awakening. It is a state of mind when hypnotized or spellbound by Maya. And Maya is the illusion of the world, the ideas of the world. Once you drop all of your ideas, that's when Maya goes away. So that it mistakes the abstract world of things and events for the concrete world of reality. It mistakes the abstract world of things and events, which is ideas. A thing is a think. An event is an idea. Because when does an event actually start? It's when we say it starts in our head. But there's really no events. It's just one event. But all events are just arbitrary that we decide. And things are just arbitrary as we decide, because all things are really one thing. At a still deeper level, it is a lack of self-knowledge. Lack of the realization that all grasping turns out to be the futile effort to grab oneself, or rather to make life catch hold of itself. So, at a still deeper level, it is a lack of self-knowledge, the lack of realization that all grasping, let me try to grasp my own hand, turns out to be the futile effort to grasp oneself. Or rather, try to make life catch hold of itself. Life catches hold of itself. How? The land of gnashing of teeth. I've been there. It's not fun. For those who have self-knowledge, there is no duality between himself and the external world. So that's the oceanic state. In Freudian psychology, they don't like to admit this, but the baby experiences the oceanic state. And the oceanic state is prior to having any ideas about the world itself. So before you have any ideas of what is, the external world and the internal world are one. And there's no differentiation between the two. There's no idea about the external world, and there's no idea about the internal world. There's no idea about me being separate from you, because if I see you in my consciousness, then you're a part of my consciousness. So that means you must be my consciousness. You must be me. And what I know to be me is what I experience. So, like your consciousness, you can never separate your consciousness from the actual world. Your consciousness is what you experience. So that's why your consciousness is one. We just think it's different because we get the idea in science class or biology that our eyes, we see the visualization of like the light beam coming out from our eyes, scanning the outside world. When really the outside world is the same thing as you. Literally the same thing. That's why you create your reality. Because you are your reality. It's not you create it. It's not that me and the universe are one. It's not that I attract things to me, but rather it's I am everything. What I believe I am is what the external world is. It's like the external world is a reflection of what I am. The universe is merely a mirror. God doesn't reward you for doing good things. The universe doesn't reward you for working hard or doing the right thing. All it is a mirror of what you are. So that's it. That's why you create your reality, because you are your reality. So the oceanic state, there's no duality between himself and the external world. That's the truth. That's how it is. That's just the facts. But we have the idea that it's not, because we have ideas and we have words, which are classification machines, which classify the world in boxes. But how could you classify everything that there is? If a classification needs another classification in order for it to be a classification, how could you classify the entire being? You can never. So it's useless using words. We should just stop talking. We should honestly devise a language where it's like, where we're like animals. No, because humans have the ability to use complex sounds and string sentences together, so that's our gift. But we should create a language which like doesn't include nouns, because nouns don't really exist, because everything is changing. The only thing constant is change, and so that means everything is in action. There's no solidified thing, no solidified you, but you have the idea that there's a solidified you because you are a person, and a person is a noun. But nouns are, it's a trickery. When you see your friend the next time, your friend isn't your friend. The Zen Buddhism, where the Buddhists believe in reincarnation in the sense that if you think you're the same person from moment to moment to moment, if I think I'm the same person from this moment to this moment, then I've reincarnated into the same person. But as long as I realize I'm not the same person ever, because there's no person to be the same person, then I haven't reincarnated. Then I don't have to reincarnate. Then nirvana. I realize that the self doesn't exist. It's just an idea of what is. Just an idea about this consciousness. But all it is the consciousness. Ask a baby, who are you? Go, because the baby doesn't have an idea has no idea of what it is. Has no idea at all. And so that's the paradise that has since been lost. So avidya is ignoring the fact that the subject and the object are relational. Like the two sides of a coin. I like this example. So that when one pursues, the other retreats. So that's what I was saying with my vision. When you realize that your consciousness is really chasing itself. You know, some people have a stroke and like one side of their face melts. I've had like a similar, I haven't had a stroke, but I've had like a moment where like part of my face is like this. Like, kind of like that. So I'm thinking a lot. But not only thinking, my consciousness is like going this way. All the time, trying to get itself. But that's like the right side of the coin trying to get the left side of the coin. That's like the head's trying to get the tails. So you're spinning in circles. So as long as the right side of the head is trying to get the tail, then you're just fooling yourself. Because the heads can never get the tails. So enlightenment is just stopping doing that. It just, okay. And then you laugh about it. And then you laugh aloud. Because it's funny. It's literally so funny that you thought you were doing anything by trying to get yourself. You thought you could actually get there. You yourself trying to get yourself. You can never do it. That's why the two sides of the coin have to reconcile their opposites and say, I am one coin. Like trying to grasp at reality. You are reality. You're still trying to grasp at yourself. This is why the egocentric attempt to dominate the world, to bring as much of the world as possible under the control of the ego, has only to proceed for a little while before it raises the difficulty of the ego's controlling itself. That's why a tyrant is crazy, because a tyrant is the person who's most afraid, and a tyrant tries to control everything. But what do you do when you've controlled everything? What do you do? Well, at that point, you want something that's not under control, because you get bored. It's like Megamind in the movie, where he finally defeats his opponent. He finally defeats the Walmart version of Superman. And then he has the riches to the city. He has the key to the city, and now he has everything. But then he gets bored because he has no one to fight. And then he wants to create heroes to fight. So that's exactly what it is. And it's like, as long as you think like your ego is real, then and that's craziness. That's absolutely insanity. I also had a realization that every single person I see, like driving in cars and in the store, are all the one consciousness, are all me. The one consciousness that we all are, from different points of view. So I saw someone, I'm like, you're me. And they're like, yeah, you're me too. So this is a really difficult problem of what we now call cybernetics, the science of control. Mechanically and logically, it is easy to see that any system approaching perfect self-control is also approaching perfect self-frustration. Such a system is a vicious circle. Because trying to control itself, trying to get at itself, trying to get its own consciousness. Such a system is a vicious circle and has the same logical structure as a statement which states something about itself. For example, I am lying, when it is implied that that statement itself is a lie. The statement circulates facetiously forever, since it is always true to the extent that it is false, and it is false to the extent that it is true. Expressed more concretely, I cannot throw a ball so long as I am holding on to it, so as to maintain perfect control of its movement. Trying to throw a ball, but control it at the same time. Thus, the desire for perfect control of the environment in oneself is based on a profound mistrust of the controller. That's what parenting does to us. That's what parenting surely has done to all of us. Makes us not trust ourselves. I mean, certainly that's true for a lot of people. The parent makes you feel guilty for existing. Says you owe us everything for us having birthed you. Oh, but wasn't it quite fun for you to conceive me? I owe you everything. Did I take anything from you? What did I take from you? You chose to have me? So it's silly. But a lot of us don't trust ourselves. So avidya is the failure to see the perfect to see the basic self-contradiction of this position. The desire for perfect control is the mistrust of the controller. The reason why you have to control everything is because you don't trust yourself to be. From it, therefore, arises a futile grasping or controlling of life, which is pure self-frustration. The pattern of life which follows is the vicious circle in which Hinduism and Buddhism is called samsara, the round of birth and death. The active principle of the round is known as karma, or conditioned action. Action that is arising from a motive and seeking a result, the type of action which always requires the necessity for further action. Man is involved in karma when he interferes with the world in such a way that he is compelled to go on interfering. When the solution of the problem creates still more problems to be solved. When the control of one thing creates the need to control several others. Karma is thus the fate of everyone who tries to be God. He lays a trap for the world in which he himself gets caught. Yep. Can't say that's not me. Yep. Oh. And it's like funny, as long as I think I exist, I'll still keep trying to get something from the world. It's like, oh, a part of me feels kind of jealous. Oh, what if me, in saying, in helping someone else, they become enlightened, and then I don't? But who doesn't become enlightened? Who doesn't become enlightened? You already are. You already literally are. So it's like, that's a fallacy in itself. Oh, someone is there and I'm not there. Yes, you are. It's only you. It's only me who is thinking that I'm not there. It's only the idea of me that's thinking that I'm not there. So as long as I think I'm not there, or I don't want to be there, as long as I don't think I'm enlightened, then I don't want to be enlightened. It's that simple fact. So I can't blame anyone. I can't say, oh, I'm jealous of you because you have enlightenment and I don't. It's like, the only reason why I don't is because I don't want to. So how could I be jealous of anybody? And isn't the fact that I'm saying these things meant to help people and not just to pursue my own egocentric interests, to make myself look wise or knowledgeable about these kind of things? That's in a way what I'm doing. It's like primarily what I'm doing. It's like, look at me. But it's also, I want to help people. So like, I'm saying that, like, look at me so that someone will come scoop me up and say, I like this person, I'll put him on TV. And then so I can help people. And so I can be on TV so then to help people. That's the ultimate goal. And the goal in itself isn't to help myself, because who is myself? But the goal is to help other people. But who is other people? It's really myself. But who's myself? It's no one. So who am I helping? Let's play the game. I'm helping humanity. I'm helping humanity wake up. And that's it. I'm really helping myself. No, I'm kidding. But reality is a simulation. It's a total simulation, because what I found out was that it's really data being fed to our brains. And so our brains decode the data in a certain way so as to experience the physical world. We experience the data, which is the physical world, But then beyond the physical world, beyond the third and fourth dimension, which are the simulations, is the real life, is reality itself. And what reality itself is the fifth dimension. And the fifth dimension is knowing that you're the entire self and that there's no other person. There's no other thing but you. That you're the entire universe. As naturally as you can figure that out at any time. As naturally as that's what you are anyways. But then when you experience the fifth dimension, it's a knowing and knowledge beyond what's being affected by the simulation itself. So the simulation itself is the matter and the sense experience coming at your brain, which is giving you the impression that it's outside, but it's really what you're experiencing is your own brain. What I'm experiencing now is my own brain. Is literally only my brain. It's giving me the impression that there's something outside of me. But what's beyond this is the fifth dimension, and you can experience the fifth dimension when you see something happen, when you just experience a synchronicity or something. It seems to talk at you, and it's beyond what it's unaffected by the simulation itself. It's unaffected by the data being fed at you. What this fifth dimensional consciousness is. It's really just yourself talking to you, saying, hey, I'm here, hello. There's more beyond this, which is total reality. Nirvana. And so say when you see a synchronicity or a number, like a number pattern, say a repeating number, or if, say, you watch a video and it seems as if the video is actually talking to you, then you're seeing what's being unaffected, knowing and knowledge being unaffected by the data coming at you. So it's like from the beyond. It's like saying hello, because what's beyond is right here. You're already there, except you think you're not there because you have data coming out your brain, creating not a physical simulation that you're actually in, but a data kind of mental simulation where it's like in your brain, you see it's like rendering all the time. And what you remember to be so will be so, but if you don't remember placing a certain object in a certain place, then it won't be in that place. It'll disappear. So it's like not a physical simulation that we're actually in, but it's data being fed at your brain, being rendered in your brain, rendered in everybody's brain. It's being sent by somewhere, and I think that somewhere is Saturn. Is the planet Saturn, and you can look this up. It's you see the rings of Saturn. I believe that's a frequency bandwidth covered in ice crystals to like amplify it. And that's literally like sending you data and information, making you literally create a false reality. And then beyond this reality is the actual oneness of everything. But we don't see that because we're being fed data and information that is not actually real, that we think is real. Because our bodies are the same thing as it. So of course it looks real. But then our quantum physicists know this because they go into matter and find out that there's actually nothing. Nothing at all. And so what's beyond this is a knowing that's unaffected by the matter itself. Is a vision. Is as if like the beyond is speaking to you. That's unaffected by the actual data being fed at your brain. It's God, the one self that you are. So it's like you meditate. Wow, look at that butterfly. You meditate, and meditation, what keeps you in the simulation is thinking about it, thinking that it's real, thinking that yourself is real and that yourself is actually in this simulation and that these items around you are actually real, and you think about them, and your thoughts keep you in this matrix. because a thought matrix, it comes from the word Maya, incidentally. And Maya is the illusion of the Godhead, the play, the art, the creative power. And from Maya comes our words measure, meter, mother, and matrix. It's our thought matrix about the world, the way we measure the world with our thoughts. And as long as you're thinking about the world, then it's real to you. And you're thinking about it. But when you stop thinking about it, because thinking is the thing that creates things. A thing is really a thought about an aspect of the one reality that there is. But once you stop thinking about stuff, and you're just sitting, that's why meditation will enlighten you. When you're sitting not doing anything, not trying not to do anything and not doing anything, but just sitting where you are. Because meditation is the way a Buddha sits. When you're sitting where you are and you stop thinking about what is, but you're just with what is. You know how like stuff starts to go up and down? So like reality itself seems to shift. Like when you're on mushrooms, the walls start to like breathe at you. Yeah, it's because our world is an illusion. And you're tapped into the state of consciousness which sees it. But then when you're in your conscious state of mind, which thinks that things are solid, because you have nouns in our language, when you're in a sober state of consciousness, you don't really see this. But when you're in a meditative state of consciousness or a psychedelic state of consciousness, then you actually see the world is changing. And that's because the world is an illusion. It's not real. And then seeing past it is seeing that this is just data being fed to my head by Saturn. It's not real. And that beyond this is the oneness, the fifth dimension. That's why what the rapture, I assume, I've had a dream about the rapture, and it was like this whole simulation is like ending. No one could go anywhere. No one could escape it. It was just the whole simulation was ending. And I think what that is like maybe like the source from which this data is being fed at our heads was destroyed, or it was ended. Like the Death Star exploded. Like you destroyed the source of which was transmitting this data to our brains, which are actually antennas for data and information coming at us all the time. So the rapture, I believe, could be when the simulation itself ends and people are just thrust into oneness. Beautiful, right? All this shit, all this illusion ends. Oh my God. And I think, what if I can't handle it? Well, can I handle this? If I've never experienced the oneness, how do I know that I can't handle it? Well, I think that I gotta let go of everything. What if I let go of everything anyways? It just happens. That'd be pretty cool. So in that sense, I can do it. And then in the rapture, I'm just raptured into oneness, and there I am. But that, even not, I've been preparing for it anyways. I've had moments of realization where I'm like, it's all me. So yeah, it's everybody's goal to break out of this matrix and see past it, see through it, and be back in reality for actual reality, the fifth dimension, the oneness dimension. Which when you experience God, it's from the beyond, it's speaking to you. So again, I'll reiterate, when you experience the beyond speaking to you, what it really is it's knowing, knowledge, experience that is unaffected by this space-time continuum. That seems to be beyond this space-time continuum. That's what it is. And it's like, oh, there it is, so it exists. There's the evidence, it exists. So let's follow that. Let's know that there's a beyond, and that's the goal, to go beyond what this illusion is, to go beyond what this simulation is, what this data is. So here's the data. what I'm in isn't real. It's all an illusion. Our scientists know this. It's been in magazines. Scientific American. People have been saying this. Elon Musk, the richest man on earth. Don't you think he hacked the Matrix? He has $300 billion. Yeah, I think he hacked the Matrix. And he says that we're in a simulation, so I think he knows. So you got to know that there's a beyond, and that beyond is not in thought, but it's in direct experience. You can't think about it, but it's beyond this data. It's unaffected. And you can even take solace in that, knowing that there's a beyond. And it's beautiful, beyond the simulation. So yeah, there it is. There's basically the secrets, and if you know, like you can see like a plane like suddenly appears in the sky. Just out of nowhere. Simulation. Or like a bird just appears out of nowhere. Help. Or a bird like suddenly glitches in the sky. I've seen a video of that. It's all data. It's all data being fed to your head. And what you're really in is no location, but it's like just the of the oneness. The consciousness, the one consciousness. And this is all the veil that covers the one consciousness. But the one consciousness can still affect the data that you're seeing, can still speak to you through the data. Unaffected by the data, the one consciousness, if you tap into it, can speak through you, can speak through it into you. But it's also the real realization in realizing that you and the external world are the same. That it's all your mind. That's the whole basis of the Hermetica, which Christianity is based off of, the Hermetic teachings, that that the whole of reality is God's mind. The mind of Atum, who creates, or Atum, who creates the cosmic mind. Then the cosmic mind creates the cosmos. And the cosmos creates you. But it's all your mind. It's all one mind, because what you're experiencing is your mind. Literally is your mind. Your mind, two forms, basically. Well, it's all one form, but your thoughts are also your mind, but then also the external reality is your mind. Because you can never separate yourself with your external reality. Your consciousness is your external reality. That's what it is. Nothing different than it. Here it is. So you never rip your consciousness. It's like what you experience is you. That's the key. Realizing that everything is you. So then what in you is there to worry about? The only time when we worry is when we think that it's not me. When we think that there's actually something that can get me. But me is everything. When you're afraid of something happening, you create for yourself what you're afraid of. You create just your experience of what you're afraid of. Doesn't mean it's not you doing it to you. Doesn't mean it's something else doing it to you. It's you doing it to you because you created it to you. It's just what you wanted your experience to be. You create your reality anyways, and because we're in this simulation and we're being fed this data, you create everything in terms of this data. So you can meld and create this data and have whatever kind of data you want appear to you, because you are the data as well. You are everything. So that's it. And the Earth is going to the fifth dimension, which means, namely, I'm sure that the simulation will just end. And we'll just see what we are in its purity. And that's the freedom. That's the ultimate freedom that's gonna come. So like, you can become prepared for it now. Like you can just start meditating and like knowing I am one. Like I literally am the self. And then when it happens, when this when Saturn probably blows up or something, or Saturn stops projecting whatever it's projecting at us, that's when all the data will go away. And then we'll be in paradise because we'll know that it's just us. Just me. Nothing different than me. And that's the beautiful thing. That's the secret. There's no other secret than that. That the entire time, all there is one consciousness. That all that exists. All that exists ever. Ever, ever, forever. All that ever exists is one consciousness. Think about that. All that exists is literally one consciousness. I've said this to myself time and time again, to where like just saying it to myself has hardly any effect. I gotta feel it now. How scary is that? But to anyone who's hearing this for the first time, it's like all that exists is one consciousness because it couldn't be any other way. And you are that consciousness. Yeah, the only thing that ever exists. How crazy is that? That's the secret to reality, that the secret societies and that the government is hiding from you. That you are the only thing that exists. So hold true to yourself, hold faith, and we'll get there someday, because it will happen. It's going to be beautiful. And we're going to be freed from this thing. And we're free anyways.